Hey everybody, it's Mr. Millington here. We're going to be talking about square roots and simplifying radicals, different ways you can express radicals. Here's some of the key vocab. It'll come up as we do the problem, so be sure to take good notes on all these things. All right, so first, if we have a problem that says just evaluate the square root of 169, that's just saying like what number times itself gives you 169. So if it said like what was the square root of 25, you would probably know that that's 5, right? You may not know the square root of 169 off the top of your head, but you can use your calculator. You just find the square root button, and then you enter in the number 169, and it's 13. That's because 13 times 13 is 169. So that's evaluating a square root. All right, you'll notice this next problem says estimate the square root of 80. The reason it says estimate is because 80 is not a perfect square. If I go in my calculator and I do square root of 80, I am going to get a very messy decimal. And so we have a process that we can use to estimate square roots of things like this. And in a little bit, we're talking about how to actually simplify them. So if I just wanted to estimate this, if I didn't have my calculator and I wanted to figure out about how big is the square root of 80, I'd have to think about the perfect squares. So perfect squares are numbers like, 1. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. Be sure to write these numbers down as I go. We're going to use these a lot. So 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8, 64. 9 times 9, 81. 10 times 10 is 100. 11 times 11 is 121. You could keep going, but this is enough to get us started. 80 is in between 64 and 81. So that means the square root of 80 has to be somewhere between 8 and 9, right? Because 8 squared gave us 64. 9 squared gave us 81. So the square root of 80 has to be between 8 and 9. And I'd say a lot closer to 9 because 80 is so close to 81. And again, if we check our calculator, square root of 80 was really close to 9, 8.94. All right, so that's estimating a square root. Let's talk about how to actually simplify this. So, we could express it as a decimal, like that 8.94 that we had. But we can also try to find an exact radical answer. So we're going to try to find that exact radical answer by doing something called simplifying radicals. Simplifying radicals. Yeah, and we'll get an exact radical answer in a minute here. So again, you want to write that list of perfect squares down the side of your paper. All of these numbers that we get when we square numbers. You could keep going higher, right? You could say 12 times 12 is 144. But anyways, the process here is you want to find the biggest one possible that goes evenly into 80. So 80 divided by, and then, try these numbers until you find the biggest one that goes into it. So I know that like 81 is not going to go into 80 because it's bigger. 80 divided by 64 won't give me a whole number. 80 divided by 49 will not. 80 divided by 36, that sounds promising. 80 divided by 36, but it doesn't work out. I know 80 is not divisible by 25, but 80 is divisible by 16. 80 divided by 16, it goes in 5 times. So we're allowed to break this down and say square root of 16 times square root of 5. What is the square root of 16? The square root of 16 is 4. So 4 root 5. 5 isn't a perfect square, so that has to stay in the radical. So this right here, this is called an exact radical answer, or a simplified radical answer. Cool. So what's interesting too is, remember I said square root of 80 was like 8.94. You could do the number that it ended up being, 4 root 5. 4 root 5. And you still get 8.94, right? Just like we got when we did square root of, just like we did when we got square root of 80. right? So they're really the same number. They're just expressed in different ways. And there's reasons in math why you'd want to simplify a radical and leave it as 4 root 5 instead of just leaving it as square root of 80. All right, so I've got one for you to try on your own. 384, go ahead and try this. Again, you want to use those perfect squares and find the biggest one that goes into it. All right, so go ahead, try this, pause it, and then come back. All right, hopefully you got this. Go back and look at these numbers. Turns out when I tried them all, 64 goes into 384, and it goes in 6 times. The square root of 64 is 8, and 6 is not a perfect square, so that just stays there. So that's your simplified radical answer for that. All right, this one, it really works the same. There's an 8 in the front. It works the same. The only difference is that you will multiply whatever you get in front of the radical by 8, right? So this is 8 times the square root of 405. So again, you got all these perfect squares. And we have to find which one goes into 405. So go ahead and try that for a minute. Pause it, and then come back. All right, hopefully you're back. I found that 405 divided by 81 gave me 5. So this 405 can break down into 81 times 5. And then I have to bring down this 8 from the beginning, right? This just kind of comes along for the ride. All right, so this is 8 times, what's the square root of 81? The square root of 81 is 9, and then we bring down the root 5. That's not a perfect square, so it has to stay in there. 8 times 9 is 72, so 72 root 5 would be our answer here. All right. A couple more points here. Simplifying these things here, square root of 17 squared. When you square something, you're just multiplying it by itself, right? So square root of 17 squared means square root of 17 times square root of 17. Square root of 17 times square root of 17 is square root of, I think that's 289. And then what's the square root of 289? Square root 289 is 17. So what happens is, the radical and the square, they kind of they act as inverses. They cancel each other out. So the radical goes away, the square goes away, so your answer is just 17. Okay, so for a problem like this, you kind of have to distribute the radical, or not the radical, the exponent. So it's really like 4 squared and then square root of 5 squared. All right, we just learned from the previous problem that square root of 5 squared, the radical and the square are going to cancel out, and you're just going to have 5. 4 squared is 16. So our answer is going to be 16 times 5, which is 80. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.